Jason Bailey spent his entire career in radio working for other people. But as he approached his 50s, he made a bold move many of us crave, becoming his own boss. Today, he's the creator of 3 podcasts, a business entrepreneur, and co-owner of a medical wellness spa with his wife.
If you're in a job you don't like, this is what Amy does. This is what this show is about. Reinvent yourself, get a plan together, and find a way, because your mental health is way more important than a paycheck.
His advice for navigating change:
I would not suggest to anyone to get into a business that you're not passionate about.
On Reinvention at Any Age. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Reinvention at Any Age. I'm Amy Sweezy, and I am passionate about helping you navigate through your reinvention. My guest today is what some might call a master of reinvention. For more than 30 years, Jason Bailey has a voice you may have heard, from rock and talk radio in Orlando and Atlanta to national spots on SiriusXM. He's hosted TV shows, covered big events like the Atlanta Open, and even popped up on ESPN and WWE. But Jason's never been one to stay in just one lane. In fact, he calls himself an entrepreneur at heart. He's launched businesses, supported charities, and now he's redefining digital media with the BPX, that's the Bailey Podcast Exchange, 3 shows, 5 days a week, over 1 million listeners. So through it all, Jason has stayed true to what he does best: connect, entertain, and keep it real. He's here to talk about what it takes to keep reinventing and how to keep your voice relevant in a constantly evolving media landscape. Please welcome Jason Bailey to the podcast. Hey, Jason, thank you so much for being here.
Amy, give me a second. I'm taking notes on how you're doing your show, because I don't do that on my show, and I need to. If any of my guests heard me intro them like you just introed me, which, side note, has never happened in my entire life. That 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million. That was good. Nicely done. Wow. Thank you.
Well, it all came from your info, so thank you for being you.
Oh, that's right. I wrote it for you. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
I did
No.
not. I did not.
I am so excited to talk about your reinvention, which really kind of mirrors mine a little bit, in that we're both Gen Xers. We left full-time media jobs in our so-called prime, right, to find our what's next. But before we get to all of that, I just want to kind of start at the beginning and let everybody know a little more about you than what was in the intro that I gave. Just tell us a little bit about your early years, where you're from, where you grew up, how you ended up in radio in the first place.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm ecstatic to be here. Like, this is really cool. I'm a big fan of yours and what you've always done in television, and I'm sure we'll get to our paths have crossed over the years from radio to TV. But I was born in Severna Park, Maryland, and I grew up without a father, which plays a huge part in who I am and in the content that I've always delivered, as my audience knows. And then at age 11, we moved to Florida, Naples, Florida, shortly after, to Sarasota, and kind of stayed there for a while, did high school, went off to college, first 2 years in Wingate, North Carolina, played a couple years of small ball college football, and things just didn't work out, and ended up at UCF, and then graduating in 97, I think. Here's my debut. 90, something like that. But, my last year in college at UCF, I really started to think about, what I wanted to do. I could have graduated college in 3.5 years if I wanted to. And so one night, we were enjoying our college evening at a friend's apartment, and one of our other fraternity brothers, actually my roommate, he was on the radio. And those days you had live bodies that did overnight radio. It's like 3:00 in the morning, and we're surrounded around this tower radio like our parents used to listen to Little Orphan Annie or The Shadow, just to wait for him to talk for 12 seconds. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So fast forward, a couple weeks, months go by. I applied for 3 different internships, one for the Orlando Predators, one for radio station WJR, that was the station he was on, another one for XL 106.7, which is another radio station in Orlando. It's a top 40 station. The JRR station was a rock station. I got accepted to all three of them same day in 1 hour. So I went to the XL a month later. The morning show at the time was called Doc and Johnny. And they pulled me into the studio. In those days, you could work for free. You could beat your interns with rulers. I mean, you could do a lot of different stuff in those days. I'm going out and doing appearances or gigs, as we call them. And one of the guys on the morning show, Johnny Magic, he was like the king of downtown Orlando. He was the guy. And I would be his promotions guy. And I'd set up this Marty antenna stick, and they would do live call-ins, and they'd give him a microphone. He'd get up on stage and he'd wiggle, and people would go crazy, and they'd give him free drinks. And then I found out how much he was getting paid per hour. I'm going, you've got to be kidding me. It's like, I can do this. So I said one night to him, I said, I want to give this a shot. He goes, well, think about it and write me a letter or give me a note, leave me a note, and we'll go from there. And then I found out that I was up for a job as a full-time producer. I was like, okay, this is it, and you know what it's like, Amy. I'm sure in TV it's called being bit by the bug too, right? You fall in love with it. I mean, you remember your first day at a television station or your first interaction with a personality, or meteorologist, you just fell in love with it, right? It was something about that day. And then it happened. Evander Holyfield. It happened. So Johnny had taught me, because he started out as a producer, look, if you're going to be a good producer, you've got to know people. Now, friends that are watching, understand this is the 90s. We didn't all have cell phones. And if we did, we used them periodically. We had pagers still, but it was grassroots, handshakes, networking, relationships. So I would go down to the theme park area, Disney and Universal, and meet the front desk people at the hotels. And I would say, hey, look, if you've got a guest that comes in, let me know. I'll get you some tickets for a concert. You just tell me which one, CDs, whatever you need. Just let me know, what name are they staying under? So I had a contact at Disney. He went by Mickey. I know, really clever. And he texted me and he says, Evander Holyfield's here. He had just won the world championship. Now, granted, we were a women demo morning show, but this was the biggest news going on, right? I mean, this was the news. So I call up and Evander Holyfield answers the phone. They do the interview reel to reel, and they tease it over the weekend. That Monday they air it. The GM comes over, wants to meet me finally. And he says, that's when he says, you really need to stick around for this job. And Evander Holyfield is the reason I got hired in the business, and I was paid $14,000 a year my first year. And I thought that was the cat's pajamas, I was like,
yes,
whoa.
I know, right? Everybody thinks there's so much money in radio and TV, and you're like, let me tell you something. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the moves, because you mentioned already that you worked in several different markets: Orlando, Tampa, Atlanta, Sacramento. But what a lot of people don't know is that those moves aren't always our choice when you work in the media business. Sometimes, or a lot of times, in order to get a promotion or a pay raise, you have to move to a new town, and you can't just stay in one place forever. And sometimes you're even forced to move because you get fired for no good reason. You may not have done anything wrong. There's just, change.
Sure.
Maybe they're switching over to a new format. So explain a little bit about that side of the business. Were you ever fired? How hard was it to move? Some of those reinventions with moving to a new place.
Oh yeah. I'm the king of being fired. Orlando, I was not. I left on my own in Orlando. And the reason why I left, and I regret numerous things about me leaving Orlando. But it was the right thing to do. There were some things happening, one within my show, two within the company, personal, a bunch of different aspects going on in my life and in business and personal. And I knew that there was a ceiling for me in Orlando. And I said, look, I got to go. And I'd always wanted to move to Atlanta. I almost thought about it a couple years prior. I just started dating my now wife of 14 years. And she, I walked into a relationship with her with two children. So I became a stepfather. and I just wanted a fresh start. I just wanted to start over, and I wanted to challenge myself. This other job happened to pop up with what was once CBS radio and sports talk. I was like, I can do that. No, I can't do that. That was difficult. Atlanta, I was fired. So after 10-ish years, things were changing. I was fired. That's when I started the podcast. That was 2022, I think, 2021, 2022. I had no desire to go back to radio after that. I was done. The Sacramento job, that was a mess. And I moved my entire family to California, across the country. And it was just, everything was bad from the beginning. Everything I was promised and told was lies. And it just was not working out. So after a year, we parted ways, and then we had to decide what to do after that. And so it was either go back to Atlanta or come back to Orlando. And it's been an interesting journey since we've been back. So I said, look, I'm going to go into business for myself. I can't be fired. The only thing I can do is stop doing it if it doesn't work.
Well, I do want to talk about your new adventures in Orlando, but before we do that, I just want to touch on one more thing with the radio. So you did talk radio, you did sports radio, you were a music DJ, so sort of all of those new formats. I assume you kind of have to change your on-air persona. It's sort of a career reinvention each time you do that. I mean, when I first met you, you were Buckethead, as you mentioned, and you also have to change your name sometimes when you do the different radio things. So do you feel like, do you see all of these things, these format changes, these name changes? Are those career reinventions when you're sort of changing your radio personality?
That's a really good question. I never looked at it like that. Uh, Maybe in a way. So with the Buckethead thing, I was an intern. They said I had a big head, I had longer hair at the time. Now I'm losing it. But that was one of the reasons why I left Orlando after 17 years. I just hated the name so much. And it's tough I'm sitting there challenging Rick Scott, the governor at the time, to things on the air and trying to have a serious conversation going by Buckethead. It's a tough sell. Now I look back on it and I'm like, should have kept the name. It's like, if you can call yourself Youngblood and Shambuzi and all these other different things, like, I should be able to call myself Buckethead. So that was that, Jason, I just wanted to go by Jason Bailey. And when I went to Atlanta, I actually went by Bailey. I went by my last name. The different formats, reinventing yourself, in my personal experience, yes, you could say it's a reinvention, but I would also add it's a maturity. When I was younger, I was learning, like in the 90s, and I'm in my 20s, and I'm at a top 40 station. We're talking to women. You're not too controversial. The jokes are light and kind of goofy, and they still, it's middle of the day soap opera stuff without the naughty stuff going on. I went to JRR. That's a rock station, and it was the last rock revolution of the genre in the early 2000s. And so I was in my head thinking that I have to be that edgy guy. And I had a lot of really bad bits, failed bits. And I was learning. And my program director, who's still in the air, his name's Pat Lynch. We butted heads a lot because I was arrogant, stubborn. I was a brat. I'm a young punk kid the world is in his hands. In those days, radio people were actually quasi celebrities. And I'm going, I'm getting sucked into this. I've got money in my pocket, my own place, my own radio show. What else do I need? I got it. Don't worry about it. And so it got to a point where I was pulled in and they said, look, you got to stop. And I go, stop what? Like, nobody told me to stop before. They would hint at things. That's what radio does. They hint. They want you to decode things. You have to tell me what you're thinking. So he finally said, you got to stop. You got to do this. And they're like, just trust me or you're going to get fired. I was like, okay, I'll trust you. And I was never scared about getting fired. I always looked at it almost kind of like martyr-esque badge of honor, which was stupid. So I tried what Pat Lynch had suggested, which was shorter breaks, in and out, quick hit radio and stuff. And it worked. Within 6 months, I was number one. It was amazing. So I owe a lot of my career to him. Even though I don't think he thinks much of me today, but I owe a lot to that guy, because if I would not, even though I was forced to listen, I'm glad I was, and that's the lesson is, shut up and listen, just shut up and listen. As the older you get, you realize this kind of thing. So, it's the maturity of the reinvention. Then when I went to Real Radio, that's a men 25-54 demographic. I was still doing this kind of guy 18 to 34 radio with goofy, kind of sexually charged bits and, quasi edgy bits and stuff. My program director there, a woman by the name of Catherine Brown, she was like, start thinking of how you can mature your show. Okay. This is what I've always wanted. And she's now telling me to do that, or offering me, or suggesting. It's like, huh. So yes, that's a reinvention, but it's a maturity. But you reinvent yourself or mature yourself in order to fit that audience, in order to win. Because that's what it's all about. You want to win. You want ratings. You want to be the best at what you do. You want to support the brand and your brand. And, I always say that, within the radio world, you're there to entertain, inform, and evoke emotion. The idea, and even with my podcast today, I still subscribe to that, is to say something or have a conversation about something that whomever's listening will at some point later that day talk to someone else about, because it was that thought evoking. That's the trick. That's the key every single time.
I know that you say that you're an entrepreneur at heart. So I want to talk a little bit about, were you always looking for something else to do on the side while you were doing full-time radio? Or was that something that it was that aha moment of, okay, I'm done with radio and I need to find something different?
No, actually, that's one of the blessings of not being in radio right now, is that I'm able to do that. I don't know how this works in TV. I'm assuming it's very similar, but in radio, they don't want you doing anything else, nor will they allow you to do anything else.
Right.
This day and age, that doesn't play. So yes, to answer your question, Amy, I can't sit still. I love to work. I absolutely love to do something. I cannot sit still.
Well, then tell us about My Court Caddy. How did that business venture come about?
COVID, actually. So I'm a big tennis fan, and My Court Caddy is a caddy that I made for tennis players. Playing a lot of singles at the time, you have 3 tennis balls, and you will have one in your pocket, and you play with the other one. And that third ball usually finds its way to get lost. And you could twist an ankle on it. It could be in your line of sight when you're serving or playing. It's just a pain in the you-know-what. So it's like, well, for those tennis players that are watching, yes, I understand that there is a caddy in the middle of the court. But what if you had a caddy that you could put behind you? And also maybe not only hold a tennis ball, but it could hold your towel. So your towel's not on the floor or on the ground. Or my business partner at the time, he was kind of the engineer guy. He had a 3D printer and stuff, and trial and error. And we're putting these pieces together. So I've got this caddy, mycourtcaddy.com, if you want to see a picture of it. I don't really spend much time on it. I don't sell a lot of them right now. But it's cool. And I always wanted to invent something tangible. I just thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, but hold on a second. I gotta stop you here, because I mean, everybody has this idea, right? We all have that one idea.
Right.
We tell at cocktail parties, I'm gonna invent this someday, and I know it's gonna make me millions. But nobody knows how to get that started. Nobody knows how to actually make it work. So knowing what your process is, I think that's really key for everybody's brilliant ideas.
It's a process. I mean, you have to have somewhat of a bankroll, and 2, you have to, what I did was, after learning like this and that through, a little bit here, a little bit there, I ended up kind of doing a Ben Franklin, pros and cons, but I would just literally take a piece of paper and I would say, okay, I'm going to need this person, this company, this person, this company. And I would have check boxes next to it. So I was like, in order to make this happen, I have to go through this person, this person, this person, this person, the marketing and the branding and stuff. That's easy. I can do that. And so I did that. I found this company in Chicago that could mass produce it. They did the mold. It got shipped. And, after I figured that part out, it was good. The earlier part, my business partner, to his credit, he was the one with the brains to be able to engineer it. At first it was 3 different pieces for this My Court Caddy done in a 3D printer. And then we later learned, because they would use them at the Atlanta 250. And the tennis tournament was in July in Georgia, just like July here in Florida, extremely hot, but even hotter on the tennis courts. So these things started to melt. So I had to now learn about ABS plastic and then redesign it so it had a backing. So anyway, it was trial and error. I mean, you really had to learn. You watch shows like Shark Tank and you're like, how did you come up with that? How did you do that? It's not overly difficult, depending on what you're trying to invent, if you find the right people to help you.
Well, even beyond the court caddy and your tennis adventures, I know that you and your wife have now also opened a spa, a live ozone therapy in Maitland, Florida. So tell us a little bit about the spa, what it is, and how in the world you ended up being a business owner of a spa from radio.
Yeah, this is our baby. It's a medical wellness spa. So I don't want anybody to get confused with hair and nails. That's not what we do. We heal people. That's what we do. It's absolutely amazing. It's Central Florida's first and only ozone therapy spa. We also offer red light therapy, halo therapy, presso therapy, PEMF. But our why is, my wife, some years back in her 30s, she got numerous forms of some lady type of cancers. And she had to go through the menopause stages, premenopause and menopause, at a young age, right? And then she eventually had a hysterectomy. And guys that are watching, Amy's podcast, let me tell you, there are very few questions, at least for me, that I've been asked that I could not answer right away. And when my wife asked me, do you want children of your own? Like biological children. I mean, my stepkids are my kids, but biological kids. And I, me just kind of, no. Well, and I stopped myself. I said, can you give me a couple days on that one? I can't remember the last time I needed a couple days. So, I went to a couple good friends and talked to them and stuff. And I said, you know what? What am I thinking? I go, I've got 2 great stepkids. It's enough, my wife's health is more important. I can't wait another 9 months to see what's going to happen here. So she goes through that. And afterwards, again, guys, when your wife goes through those stages, it is tough. It is tough for them, extremely tough for the woman, but it is tough for the relationship, because hormonally women just aren't themselves, and it's not their fault, and guys, we have to understand it. We have to educate ourselves. But still, it's tough. And it was a tough period in our relationship. The reason I'm telling you and your audience that is because we had tried every traditional method to have her sleep, to balance her hormone, to all these things. Traditional medicine did not work for us. We discovered ozone therapy, which is also called activated oxygen therapy. We discovered magnesium butter, which magnesium is a natural anti-inflammatory. Boom, everything is fixed. Everything it was magic. So once we learned about these things, we were like when we were in California, my wife actually was working at a wellness spa that had all these different therapies. We were familiar with them, her more than me. But I would go in and visit her after my show, and I would hear these stories from patients, and I just didn't believe them. I mean, like, scientifically, that's impossible. There's no way your herpes is gone. No way that your mono went away in a week. No way that your pathology reports are down over 60%. Just no way. You're trying to tell me because you're doing ozone therapy? Come on, please. as much as I wanted to, I do believe in at the time, even holistic medicine because of what it did for us. I'm like, okay, come on, now let's get real. But I would hear it over and over and over again. So I started educating myself and researching this. And it's a thing. It's real. Ozone therapy has been around for over 100 years. Many traditional doctors will administer it, but they will do it through blood draw, insufflation, uh, uncomfortable ways. I've done the blood draw before. It's pricey, it's expensive, it's time consuming. What we brought to Central Florida is what's called a Hocket sauna. It administers ozone therapy, aka activated oxygen therapy, in a non-invasive way, working conducively with other modalities within the Hocket sauna: chromotherapy, PEMF, FSM, aromatherapy. Our patients are anywhere between cancer to COVID to neuropathy to autism to HIV to just those that want to biohack and be healthy. And the cherry on top is you burn up to 800 calories in every session. It's interesting that I'm having this conversation with you today. We just had one of our patients become colon cancer free. And just let me make this very clear. We work with doctors. We're not the end all be all. We can be if you choose that, but we're not saying don't do chemotherapy, don't do your pills, don't do what your traditional doctor is telling you to do. Let us help with the process. A lot of our patients, especially on those types of levels, their goal is to get off the pills, especially HIV patients. Can I tell you another quick story that's kind of
Sure.
really tugging on the heartstrings? A couple months ago, I went to an allergist. I have bad allergies, which halotherapy for you allergy sufferers is great for. And, I go through the process to get these allergy drops. And I finally meet with the allergist. He's in his 80s. He's old. He's curmudgeon. He's stoic. He's a doctor, And I asked him, I said, do you recommend halotherapy for your patients? What is that? They had no idea. I was surprised. So I explained to him what it was. And I told him I was surprised. He said, so how do you know so much about it? Told him who I was, told him that, we own, a live ozone therapy spa. And he goes, ozone therapy. I said, yeah. He says, tell me, he starts grilling me on it, like from a doctor's perspective. So now I'm going toe to toe with a guy that's been a doctor for like 60 years. I'm not a doctor. Okay. And so I finally, I answer all his questions. No problem. I'm not hiding anything. And I finally ask him, I stop him. I said, sir, why are you grilling me on this? You obviously this is not your thing. So I'm just curious on why you're so curious. He goes, all right, cards on the table, please. He says, I've been practicing medicine, 60 years. He goes, the only thing that I subscribe to is what's in medical journals and, pills and surgery kind of guy, traditional doctor. He says, but the last couple years, I think 10, one of his daughters has been in a really bad way. And so he went to some of his colleagues that he trusts, 5 different doctors, and they all recommended ozone therapy. So he started doing research. Then he tried to get his daughter to go, but they were doing it through blood draw, through needles. And she didn't want to do that. So now I'm telling him that he has an option to do ozone therapy non-invasively. He's interested. His daughter comes in, they do 3 sessions. She's starting to feel it. This was months ago. To kind of get to the end here, she's now coming a couple times a week. His wife is coming. His other daughter's coming. He actually has started doing ozone therapy. And he says, I just want to thank you too. I said, for what? He says, thank you. I get goosebumps every time.
I know.
He goes, thank you for giving me my daughter back.
Aw.
And I said, sir, that's our pleasure. He goes, no, you don't understand. He goes, she wakes up in the morning with a purpose now. This is my Emily from before. This is my Emily 10 years ago. She's motivated. She smiles. She's got plans. There's life in her body on a daily basis. She wants to do activities. I haven't seen this in a decade. She's not in pain anymore. And you two gave that back to me. He goes, I can't thank you enough. I said, look, man, it's our, like, it's one of the best stories that we've had. I mean, it's just so amazing. So the reinvention, since that's what, you do on this podcast, has made me realize at 50, there are more important things in life than what you think is important today. And Alive has given that to me and my wife, but definitely to me, because I'm a special breed of a thinker. And so it is, it's been, it, I believe it's God's plan. I'm a believer. And I think that God has a plan for all of us, and California happened for this reason. I had to jump through hoops of hellfire in order to get here. But that reinvention, cause like when you talk about reinvention, Amy, you talk about the business side of reinvention and reinventing yourself traditionally, like as a brand, but also when you reinvent yourself, as a brand or in the business sense, depending on what avenue, what path you take, even you're learning. And again, going back to what I was saying with radio, you're maturing. So you reinvent yourself personally and emotionally, when you're going through this process, which is when it all comes to be and it's all said and done, that final day, that's the most important thing you can leave this world with, right?
I love that you're so passionate, obviously, about this, because I think to have a successful business, you have to be behind something that you are passionate about. I love that it's helped your wife. I love that you're so supportive. Obviously, I'm in that whole menopause phase of life myself. But I also know that opening a business and starting a brand new thing you've never done before comes with its own set of challenges. So, what have been the biggest challenges opening this business? And what advice, more importantly, do you have for others who want to make a leap from full-time work to a self-employed business owner?
Great question. The very simple answer too is, with us at Alive Ozone Therapy Spa, we're Central Florida's first and only ozone therapy spa, right? That's the tag. That's what I say to people. The blessing and the curse. The blessing is you're the first. Everybody wants to be the first, right? The curse is you're the first. So you have to educate the market, which means, marketing, advertising, branding, networking. So, when you enter in the whatever business it is, you have to fill a void that is needed, right? We assumed that there was a void because everybody wants to be healthy. We were correct. If you are a lawn guy, there's obviously a void to fill. You just have to find who needs it filled. And then it's competition, right? We don't have any competition when it comes to ozone therapy. Not yet. We will eventually. I would say if you're getting ready to get into a business, find a unique business. Find something that's neat. Find something that's different. Find something that stands out, but fills a void and has got longevity. That's the other thing. Is it going to be there in 5 years? Is it going to be there in 10 years? I would not suggest to anyone to get into a business that you're not passionate about. I want to feel like it's mine. I want to feel there's a difference between getting a paycheck from a boss, whether it's more or not, but definitely for this example, more. I'm not making the same money, but I will tell you that when I get a new sponsor, like I just got a new sponsor the other day, there's a feeling of I did it. I got a raise. I earned that. I'm not going to lie to you. Turning 50 was tough for me. And it's still a tough pill to swallow. I don't know why. I'm not really the guy that usually has issues with stuff like this, but this whole move, how California panned out, and getting settled in and getting everything back on track, and making sure, our kids, even though they're out of the house, our daughter's the University of Alabama, our son lives on the coast of Florida, and everybody's good. We finally, like just recently, I was talking to my wife about this, and I turned to her and I said, I like our life. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, I think I'm getting to that place where I'm able to celebrate those little wins. And again, that's reinventing yourself, right? That's saying, hey, look, accept the good things that you got, because, at our age now, we're losing people, we're losing people left and right, people that we grew up with, people that we thought were indestructible, invincible. But I want to celebrate what I have. and not to compare it to people that don't have it, but there are many people that have a lot less. And I know that sounds very cliche, but look at your wife or your husband, look at your kids and find the good in everything. Try to, at least. Look at your business, and then if you're in a job you don't like, this is what Amy does. This is what this show is about. Reinvent yourself, get a plan together and find a way, because your mental health is way more important than a paycheck. It is so much more important. And I'm not one of those guys, trust me, I am not one of those guys that comes with the excuses because of all this stuff. But I will tell you, mentally, I was drained doing radio for all those years, dealing with people telling me how to do my job when they've never done it. That's infuriating. So find out what you're good at, what you've always been good at, that you've not been able to be good at as a business, and be good at it and enjoy it and grow it and own it, and reinvent yourself, but do it soon enough that you can enjoy the fruits of your labor. Don't wait too long. You know what I mean? Find a way to do it. And there is a way. There's always a way. There's always a way.
I love this. Thank you so much. Jason, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a guest on my podcast. I know people are going to want to know more about the ozone therapy. They're going to want to listen to your podcast. Where can they find you and follow you?
JasonBailey.com for all the podcast stuff with the Bailey Podcast Exchange, all the social media links. There's a lot of them. So yeah, if you just go to JasonBailey.com. And as far as a live ozone therapy spa is liveozoneTherapySpa.com. But thank you for having me. I really, really enjoyed this. This is great. It was awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you. I can't wait to check out the ozone therapy myself. And I know that your story of reinvention is going to inspire so many others. So Jason Bailey, thank you.
Thank you.
So what about you? Were you inspired by Jason's story of reinvention? Take an honest inventory of your life right now. Are you energized or just enduring? Are you passionate or just calling it in and collecting a paycheck? If you're unsettled or craving a reinvention, I'm not suggesting you just go and quit your job today. Instead, use these unsettled feelings to plan your next move. Get a clear direction. Make a plan. Give yourself permission to want more. No matter your age, your background, or how long you've been in one lane, it's not too late to change direction. New chapters don't begin by accident. They begin by making a choice to make a change. Whether you want to reinvent yourself or you have to reinvent yourself, remember, reinvention is possible. Go make it happen for you today.